explaining shutter speed. Welcome to this video in my Learn Photography for Free series. The question has been asked, when and why should I change my shutter speed to take a photo? Shutter speed is one of the three key elements of exposure, along with aperture and ISO. These three elements are called the exposure triangle. Shutter speed controls the amount of time that the camera's sensor is exposed to light when the shutter opens, and it plays a crucial role in capturing sharp and well-exposed images. In this video, we'll cover everything you need to know about shutter speed, including how it works, how to measure it, and also how to use it to create different effects in your photos. First, let's take a closer look at what shutter speed is and how it works. The shutter is a mechanical curtain that sits in front of the camera sensor that opens and closes. When you press the shutter button, the shutter opens for a brief moment, allowing light to hit the sensor, and this creates your image. The amount of time that the shutter stays open is known as shutter speed. The shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second, with common values ranging from 1 second to 1/8,000th of a second, depending on camera model. A slow shutter speed, such as 1 second, means that the shutter stays open for 1 second. And while a fast shutter speed, such as 1/1000th of a second, means that that shutter opens very quickly for a short shutter speed or shorter period of time. It's important to note that shutter speed is closely related to aperture and ISO. Aperture controls the amount of light that enters the lens, while ISO controls the sensitivity of the camera's sensor to light. Together, these three elements work together to determine the overall exposure of an image. Now that you understand what shutter speed is, let's talk about how to measure it. On most cameras, the shutter speed is displayed on the camera's LCD screen or in the viewfinder. It is often represented by a fraction such as 1/1000th or 1/30th. The denominator of the fraction represents the shutter speed, with larger denominations indicating a faster shutter speed. For example, 1/1000 is a faster shutter speed than 1/30th. Adjusting the shutter speed is typically done by using the camera's manual mode or switching to shutter priority mode. In manual mode, you have full control of the shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. While in shutter priority mode, you can adjust the shutter speed, while the camera will automatically adjust the aperture and ISO for the given exposure needed. Now that you know how to measure and adjust shutter speed, let's talk about how to use it to create different effects in your photos. One of the most important things to keep in mind when using shutter speed is the rule of thumb for handheld photography, which is to use a shutter speed that is at least as fast as the reciprocal of the focal length. For example, if you are using a 50mm lens, a safe shutter speed would be 1/50th of a second or faster. Using a slow shutter speed can create motion blur, which can be used to create a sense of movement or motion in a photo. There are two ways to do this. You can keep your camera still and locked on a scene while a subject, such as a car, travels through the frame. A slow shutter speed will cause the car to blur, while the rest of the scene is in focus. In creative photography in low light or at night, when cars have their lights switched on, in this kind of setup, it would create light trails. You can follow your subject, such as a car, or at slow shutter speed, which is still fast enough to capture a good photo of the car moving, but slow enough for everything else to blur. This is called dragging the shutter. So you follow the car, snap the photo, the car stays in focus, and the rest is blurred. It is also important to note that when using slow shutter speed, it is highly recommended to use a tripod to prevent camera shake. Using a fast shutter speed can freeze motion if set fast enough, which is useful for capturing fast-moving subjects such as fast-moving cars, athletes, or wildlife. For example, if you are taking a photo of a bird in flight, you can use a fast shutter speed to freeze the motion of the bird's wings. A fast shutter speed can be used to reduce the amount of light in a high contrast scene as well, such as in a landscape with bright sky and dark foreground. This can help to prevent the sky from being overexposed and the foreground from being underexposed, resulting in a more balanced exposure. Flash sync speed is the fastest shutter speed at which a camera's flash can be used effectively. When using a flash on your camera, the shutter speed should be set to the flash sync speed, or slower, to ensure that the entire image is properly exposed. For example, if the flash sync speed is 1/250th of a second, you can use a shutter speed of 1/250th or slower to ensure that the entire image is properly exposed when using the flash on the camera. This technique can be used to add full light to a scene or to freeze motion in low light situations. Light painting is a technique where the camera shutter is left open for a longer period of time while the light source moves around in the scene. This can create interesting effects such as light streaks or trails of light. Slow shutter speeds are typically used for light painting as they allow more light to be captured onto the camera sensor. For example, a shutter speed of 30 seconds would be used to capture a light trail created by a flashlight moving around a room. You would need to set your aperture to desired setting to allow the light to be captured at your desired depth of field and an ISO value to your desired exposure. You would also need to set focus manually to a point in the image where you capture everything in focus, or that which is important. Combining shutter speed and other techniques can create unique and dynamic images. One example is the zoom burst technique, where you zoom the lens while the shutter is open, creating a burst of light that radiates outward from the center of the image. To achieve this effect, you would typically use a slow shutter speed and wide aperture. In lower light situations, this works better. This can be used to create a sense of motion, energy, and dynamicism in the image. This may take some practice, but creates an interesting effect. This can also be combined with on-camera or off-camera flashes in first curtain or second curtain mode, where each will look and create a slightly different type of photo. It is important to keep the camera as still as possible during the zoom process, so a tripod or a monopod is recommended. Experimenting with different shutter speeds can lead to a wide variety of creative and dynamic images. Whether you're trying to freeze fast-moving subjects, reduce the amount of light in a scene or create a sense of motion and energy. There is a shutter speed that you can use that can help you to achieve the effect that you are looking for. I encourage you to take your camera and go out and experiment with different shutter speeds and to share your results with me on email. I would love to see the unique and creative images that you're able to capture. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and do join me for the next video where I'll be answering more of your photography questions. If you do have a question about photography, do email me or post it down in the comments. Thanks for watching.